okay with you, let me know if it is not. What I would like to do is go around the room and really get to know each other a little bit. Tell us who you are and the affiliation with Perkins and the institution that you are representing today. So let's start with Crystal Gramsci.
Hello, my name is Crystal Gramsci. I am with SUNY Erie Community College. I am the Director of Institutional Grants, but also the Perkins Grant Officer for the last few years or so. So thank you for this presentation.
Well, thank you for joining us, Crystal. And next is Wendy Welling. Wendy.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm obviously Wendy Welling, and I work for the Rochester Educational Opportunity Center as the director for our Perkins Grant. I have been doing this for the last couple of years and currently in the process of completing the 2023 grant. So I'm hoping this presentation today will help me with goal formatting.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. Welcome. Maddie Sallow. Maddie.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Maddie Sallow. I am from SUNY Cobleskill. I am the IR analyst and I've been on for a little over a year. So I'm looking forward to this presentation and learning a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. Mickey Yaseski.
Hi, I'm Mickey Yaseski. I work for Corning Community College. I'm the research analyst on the Perkins Grant. And I'd say I've been doing it probably close to 6 years now. But I'm always looking to learn more because I feel like even though I've been doing this for 6 years, I'm still not 100% confident in things. So I'm looking forward to learning something new.
Thank you, Mickey. Welcome. Daniel Sargent. Daniel.
I'm going to let you see me too. I'm Daniel Sargent. I'm the assistant to the president at Herkimer County Community College. I've been working on our Perkins Grant for, I looked back the other day and I'm in my 7th year of doing it. I believe I'm the grants officer for the college for Perkins, although I have a co-chair who is our director of institutional research. But obviously non-gender recruitment is something that everyone's concerned with. So we're looking forward to learning some new things today.
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome. And so Penny Sodden. Penny.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Penny Sodden. I'm the grants officer at Kingsborough Community College. I recently started back in December, so this is my first cycle doing the application. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say and to be involved in Perkins.
Thank you, Penny. Welcome. Tara Winter. Tara.
Hi, my name is Tara Winter. I'm the Chief Strategic Planning and Institutional Effectiveness Officer at SUNY Cobleskill. I work with our Director of Grants and Sponsored Programs to help with some goal setting and analysis. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Welcome, Tara. Mary Beth Phillips. Mary Beth.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Phillips. I am the new Director of Grants Development at Finger Lakes Community College. I just started in January, so this is also my first time going through Perkins, and it's not as bad as people made it out to be, but it's also a lot of moving pieces, so I appreciate all this help.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Welcome. Melanie Lewis.
Yes, greetings from BMCC. My name is Melanie Lewis, indeed, and I'm excited to be here with you all today. I work in our Office of Internships and Experiential Learning as one of our coordinators. So thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you for being here, Melanie. And last but certainly not least is Ms. Kimby Mead, NYSET, our colleague at NYSET.
Hey everybody, I wanted to let you see my face. I know a few of you by name. I'm your, well, for some of you, your Perkins Grant Liaison at NYSET. And I am really happy to hear or see, sort of hear all of you here working on this, because I know it's something we all struggle with. And I am looking forward to learning as right along with you.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kim. And so let's make this really interactive and make it really a learning platform, please feel free to interrupt, unmute yourself, interrupt and ask a question. We're a pretty small group, so it's not going to be disruptive for anybody. We're all here to learn more. So there's a benefit of having a smaller group of that. So it will be recorded. If you want to share with your colleagues, please do so. It will be uploaded to the NET website. And also you have the chat button. If you feel in the middle of the presentation, you have a question that pops up, please put it in the chat. We'll come back to it and we'll address it after. So I have a few slides that I am going to go through. And then, you know, hopefully we'll stop midway so that I'll make sure that after each segment, make sure that you don't have any questions. But please feel free to interrupt and ask whatever questions that you have. So today we are learning about developing an evaluation plan, defining and measuring success. So before we start talking about that, again, I would like to emphasize that the non-traditional employment and training program has been supported by NISAT through the Perkins Act for many years to provide technical assistance to all of you to improve recruitment and retention of students who are pursuing CTE fields of study that are non-traditional for their gender. And these are defined as fields of study that are has less than 25% of either gender. And the list of these fields and titles or zip codes are uploaded on the NET website as well. So why NET? Why do we need a program that deliberately and intentionally and work on that, and that you're all asked to really develop plans that include recruitment and retention, focus on recruitment and retention of gender non-traditional students, because really is a matter of economic development, a matter of economic justice, and a matter of gender equity. It is a matter of economic development because, as we know, there are demographic changes of the population that we are experiencing. This is coupled with the retirement of the baby boomers, and this will create a huge gap of in the workplace. So it's no longer enough or sufficient to just use the traditional pool of students that we used to draw from, but we really need to draw from a larger pool of workers. And I'm embedded in the university as well, and we know that enrollment or low enrollment is really a problem across the board. Everybody is experiencing it. So we look at special populations in general as really these untapped resources that you can pull from and leverage to increase the numbers of enrollments. And really it is a matter of economic development, because we really need to meet the needs of the workplace and preserve our global competitiveness in the global market. We need to really proactively and deliberately develop the next generation of workers that the economy needs. It's also a matter of economic justice, because each individual must have full and unhindered access to all vital occupations, including those that are female or male dominated. It's also a matter of gender equity, because as a society, we really created these dichotomies between what women can and cannot do, and what men should and should not do. And it is really harmful. It creates harmful stereotypes. And by breaking those dichotomies with our work and really changing the balance and making these fields more representative of every gender, we're really breaking down these barriers and allowing individuals to achieve their full potential and contribute productively to any occupation that they choose, not ones that are socially constructed. So here is an outline of the presentation part of the webinar. First, we will discuss why we need an evaluation plan, why we need to measure progress toward goals as we are implementing programs, and why we need to measure again when we end or complete the implementation of our programs. So what are the benefits and the pitfalls of not having an evaluation plan? We will also get in more details into 7 phases of developing your plan that each have really a few details, few steps to complete. And so please consider this all as an introduction to developing the evaluation plan. And as I said earlier, we're available to provide technical assistance to all of you, that is one-on-one with you and your team, to help develop your plans or facilitate the development of your plans using these procedures. So let's see. So the first thing first, why do we need to evaluate? Why do I need to convince you that you have to have an evaluation plan? And many of you, I'm sure, already have a plan with various degrees of details. The reason why an evaluation plan has to really guide our work, our day-to-day work, and our annual and semi-annual work is because really many of us have experienced this condition where we have been using a lot of strategies year after year, and we've not seen any benefits that come out of those activities or these strategies that we're using. We keep really doing them out of habit and out of being consistent. This is the way that we've done it always, and the way that we will continue to do it. So we really keep throwing money at the wall, hoping that something will change eventually. And we have been doing this, we've all experienced a situation like that. If we have an evaluation plan that really is used as a guide to our work, it's a plan that is formative and summative, you're much less likely to experience this, because what you're doing with an evaluation plan is that you're monitoring achievement towards or progress towards your goal. You have specific milestones, and you're catching yourself midway when strategies and activities are not yielding the progress or reaching the targets that you have set for yourself. So you avoid a lot of efforts, a lot of frustration, and a lot of funds, to be honest, that are invested without any return on these investments. We're also much more likely to keep ourselves and our staff and our colleagues accountable to what we said we have planned to do. So when we see activities or tasks that have not been implemented, we're much more likely to catch that and correct course as we go along. Evaluation plans also create pathways or a roadmap to desired change, which is bound to ensure maximum return on human and fiscal financial investments. And evaluation plans are also really great project management tools. To create an evaluation plan, it really pushes you and forces you to also create a work plan, an effective work plan, and put together protocols for managing this plan and making corrections midway. So I hope that I convinced you that really it is incredibly important to have an evaluation plan that guides your work, and it is important for your success, and that not having a plan really make you take a lot of risks, and it's really akin to flying an airplane while you're building it, and there's a lot of risk obviously in that scenario. So there are 7 steps that we had discussed earlier in the outline. I will go over them, each of them, and we'll use a case from the non-traditional, gender non-traditional field of study to demonstrate how the plan works. But again, the content here is much less important than the process itself and learning the process. So step 1 is confirming the theory of change. So applying the theory of change to your analysis, to the problem you are facing, and to the development of activities and interventions that target addressing the problem, really makes sure that your activities are consistent with the mission and with the mission of the Institute, and are in sync or really aligned with the empirical evidence of what works and what does not work in order to enact the desired change. So applying the theory of change to the development of activities makes you visualize the activities that you will address to, or you will implement to address the problem, and make sure that they are related to the mission and that they will lead to the desired change. Your theory of change are really the ideas that you have about how change will be achieved. It has to be really rooted in empirical evidence in the literature. And so they cannot be just based on opinions or ideas on how we can change the problem. So that's where, you know, science really intersect with our evaluation plan. And so these ideas or concepts must be flexible, and they must be monitored regularly and improved as we experience changes in our knowledge base or in the science. So we know that every year there are changes that happen in our knowledge base. Things that we thought were effective may not be as effective as we thought they are. So it's important to be really connected to that literature and to make sure that we are using activities that will get us to that desired change. So going back to step 1.1, we start with analyzing the problem. And obviously, this is one of the problems that we label as wicked problems because they're really complex. They really have a lot of intersecting pieces and really resistant to change in a way, because gender is a social construct. And we know that the root causes of the problems that we have in recruiting and retaining gender non-traditional students to gender non-traditional fields of study is a cultural problem. And we know that as a society, we created these dichotomies. And then there are so many symptoms that you see here in those blocks that are on the slide: gendered systems, gendered socializations, exclusions from networks, exclusions from opportunities, chilly classrooms, microaggressions and discrimination, stereotypes, unwelcoming campus spaces, isolation, lack of sense of belonging, depression, stress and anxiety, low self-esteem, inability to internalize professional identities, dropout threats, poor performance, work-life balance conflicts, lack of role models, lack of mentors, and gendered curricula. So these are all. I can provide you with research that talks about each of those blocks and that demonstrate with empirical evidence that this is the case. When you have, that does not mean that it happens in every campus space, but that we have to be aware that it happens because as members of a society, we absorb ideas of social stratification and what people should and shouldn't be doing. And we really have a phenomenon called the unconscious bias. So our minds create these shortcuts that makes assumptions and stereotypes about people based on these narratives or preconceived assumptions. So it's important to be aware of them and to be aware of how they affect these students in spaces, and not to blame ourselves for them, but to say that they exist, acknowledge them, and work on making sure that the campus provides mitigating strategies to be able to provide a welcoming environment to these students and the extra support they need to navigate this. But know that this is also a larger cultural problems. So, so we know from research studies that being an occupational minority can be anxiety provoking. People may experience high levels of discrimination, stereotypes, financial barriers to entry. They may have fewer role models, as we said, and have less than an ideal space to grow and develop. There's a link between discrimination and being an occupational minority and psychological trauma, similar to post-traumatic stress. So believe it or not, this has been documented by the literature. So, that stress can cause all sorts of adverse health impacts and health effects, including low self-efficacy, low self-confidence, mental health issues. So people who are in these situations, in these spaces, when they're faced with microaggressions or stereotypes, threats, they are really much more likely to attribute the problem to themselves rather to the external environment. And this has been really a point of a learning moment that your faculty and your staff, if they're aware of it, they can detect that attribution in a student and try to correct that narrative and really reverse that narrative through recognizing where the attribution lies. So occupational minorities in campus spaces really can experience those spaces as very isolating, very exclusionary. And of course, not all are the same. There's also an organizational culture, but there's also an occupational culture that it supersedes the organizational culture. So there is research that tells us that engineering, for example, you can work with a lot of women in engineering, in the engineering field in an organization, but still experience the culture of engineering. Which tend to be male dominant. So it's important to really understand how students are experiencing these spaces. It's important to structure the problem that we would like to address. So here I am interested in, I'm interested in female students in computer science who have been, I'm an institutional actor and I've seen the data in my institution as a case here. And I've seen that female students are either changing their majors or are dropping out altogether in the last 3 years. This trend has been consistent. So I'm asking why it's important at this point to not be alarmed, but we consider really the critical need that I need to bring some, to stop that trend. So it's important at that stage to do an investigation of why this is happening. and to go to the students, do exit interviews or interviews, phone interviews or surveys, to really try to understand the root causes of why this pattern exists. So, and not to make a guess of why it exists. So I'm assuming here that I've done this climate survey, and by the way, Net can help you again with doing climate surveys. So let's say I connected with the women who left the program to inquire about the reasons why this is happening. So I found that these women are experiencing burnout, and they're experiencing low self-efficacy, poor performance, isolation, stress, and work-life balance issues. And so in the second step here, I am trying to identify who the audience that I am concerned with. And it's really important to define your audience, because in the shuffle, we can really forget why we're doing the things we do, why we're implementing the program we're implementing. This step is incredibly important, because oftentimes we get confused about why we are carrying out certain activities. Everything we do should be directed or should center the students, the non-traditional gender non-traditional fields of study, students in these fields. And so we may be doing programs for faculty, training, or administrators, but it is for the sole purpose to improve the climate for the students. It's incredibly important to focus on that, and students as our customers, and faculty and staff as really serving the students, because it really affects how we design and how we provide content for everything we do. And it's important to just reassure ourselves at this step of who the audience we are working for. It's important to do that exercise and start with centering the student. So let's see, I'll stop here and see if there are any questions, any thoughts. Okay. And feel free to just unmute yourself and talk. So in the second step, we really start with the impacts. What do we wish to make? What are the results, the end, the ideal state of affairs? We have the real state of affairs right now, but what is the ideal state of affairs? And a lot of common issues when you are working with theory of change is that you don't start with the impact. It's really important to imagine that vision and to start with this impact. So my desired impact or result is that female students in computer science complete, graduate, and attain employment comparable to their male counterparts. Because we don't want, when we see disparities, then there's still more work to be done. If there are disparities between the graduation or completion levels or employment levels between males and females. So I'm articulating here the impact that I wish to make, or the ideal state of affairs. And the next step is really to identify the assumptions. What are the assumptions? They are the preconditions that need to happen or need to be there to help us achieve the end or the ideal state of affairs. So here is where you bring the literature and the research, and make sure that your assumptions are embedded in empirical evidence, so that you are not just pursuing other individual perspectives or opinions about what will make the change. So the assumptions, again, are the preconditions, and I used here the self-determination theory, which has been applied extensively in higher education and many other fields, that tell us that every human being must have 3 different basic needs to be able to function and perform at higher level and at an ideal and optimal level. These are to have a sense of competence and self-efficacy that I can succeed, a self-competence. And the second is an assumption that the students must cultivate a sense of relatedness, that I have to have connection to others. We're really social animals. We need to have that sense of belonging, the sense of this is a space that I'm welcomed in. And the third is a sense of self-control or sense of autonomy. And so these are very important. That's a very important step. So, so then again, here is a point where I'm going to translate the preconditions to activities or programmatic items. In order for women to feel a sense of competence, they need to have an ability to enhance their skills and field-based knowledge. This will increase their self-efficacy, their connections, and in order for female students, that's the second arrow that you see under programmatic activities, in order for female students in computer science to feel a sense of relatedness and connections, they need to have they need to experience a welcoming environment, which means we really need to increase awareness of unconscious bias that are directly directed to them or from others or indirectly affecting them. So faculty and staff need to be trained to live a conscious life and to examine and reflect on the unconscious bias that we all have, but to also interrupt bias when it is experienced or manifests itself in front of them. So this is needed to create really also a sense of community. And so we need to provide these students with coping strategies, coping skills, resilience, and teach them these strategies and those skills. In order for women to have a sense of autonomy, the third that you see here, third item, they need the support to manage what we call the determinants of work-life balance, whether it's childcare or other services needed to manage. These are all programmatic conditions that inform the activities I will provide to the female students. Now, there are also instrumental conditions that need to exist for me to be able to carry out these activities and to achieve the desired change that I've talked about and articulated earlier. So, so you see that orange block on the right-hand side. And so this is the infrastructure that I have in the institution to carry out these activities, these programmatic activities. And I'm making an assumption that they exist. And at this point, you need to consider whether there is anything missing in that infrastructure that you need to focus on and also include in your activities to be able to move forward with the desired change. So if you don't have the human resources to carry out the programmatic elements, then you won't be able to move forward. If you don't have the funding, you won't be able to move forward. You need the policies and the protocols that guide the work. And you need to really interrogate at this stage of the process, the preconditions that need to exist, and the infrastructure is part of it. So in the next phase, we will translate the preconditions to specific activities that you see here. You will see here there is a direct result of the thought process I went through to articulate that theory of change. And that tells me, based on empirical evidence, how I can, as an institution, enable competence, relatedness, and a sense of self-control and autonomy in female students pursuing computer CTE studies. So you see here that I came up with some activities. And again, the content here is less important than the process itself. So I came up with tutoring, mentoring, faculty training, case management for competence. For relatedness, I came up with a few of them as well. Social activities, connections with networking and networking with industry, career services, and in the final block, the autonomy and self-control, community support, and referral to services, advisement, and academic pathways. Again, you know, I made those assumptions that these are not the only assumptions that one can make. There are so many others that you can make, but I'm including them as examples of how you again, move the process forward. So this slide really represents phase number one, the thinking process, the product of phase number one of confirming the theory of change. I structured the problem, or I defined the problem. I defined what is the end goal, what is the desired change that I want to see, and the activities. Any questions so far? All right, so moving on to phase two is develop your logic model. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the logic model, which really is, again, a way of organizing our thoughts and making sure that the plan is laid out in ways that can be monitored and evaluated. And so the logic model includes the 6 items that you see on the screen, and some of you in the introduction said you're interested in developing the goals and objectives. So here is your chance to ask any questions. Moving on to the components of the logic model are these 6 components that you see. Again, we have developed activities or drafted several activities that we will go here and refine as we refine our thinking. And what I forgot to say is that this is cyclical for a reason. It's a cyclical process. We go from one step to the other, but again, back to the steps that we created already to refine our thinking. It's important to be a linear thinker, but also a non-linear thinker. You can jump to avoid from step to step and skip a step to avoid analysis paralysis. But again, you know, it really does provide you a nice way of being organized and having your thought process unfold in very clear ways. So the activities and the impacts I defined in phase 1 of the process. I drafted them, but let's move on to the inputs. And what are the inputs? The inputs really are the assets or the resources that we have. They include personnel time, non-personnel resources that I have, existing financial resources. So I asked myself 2 questions. What are the resources that I need? What already exists in my institution? And what resources I need to develop to productively implement these activities? Many people really focus only on what exists, and that makes them really miss the boat or limit the potential of where they can go. Because the resources can be developed. It's not, I've managed a center for 20 years, and this has been a research center. And this has been my methodology always to really think of what can be and not just what is. I've seen a lot of people think about, oh, I can do programs only if it fits in the skill set of the people that I have. But you can always reverse that thinking and say, I can always acquire the resources that I don't have, whether it's human or financial. And that really opens up a lot of potential for your institution. And so in this stage of the process, you identify what exists and what you need to develop and really try to quantify that. based on the activities or the draft of the activities you've already developed. And so that is step number 2.1. Step number 2.2 is to really assess or identify the goals. So I know what my vision is, what the impact I want to do, but in here, I want to identify the goal. And the goal is different from objectives. The goal is overarching, it's broad, it's global, and it is about the desired state of affairs. It has two items always, the audience and the situation or the behavior that I would like to change. So if you look here, it's global, it's overarching, it doesn't really talk much about specifics. That's where the objectives will come in. So my goal here is to increase representation of women in computer science at my institution. So it has the audience, which are women in computer science, and the behavior situation that I want to change, which is increased representation, student representation in particular. All right, so what are the SMART objectives? We'll move on to the next step, which is creating SMART objectives. And so SMART objectives are what you see here. SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timed. And so specific details exactly what needs to be done, thoroughly defines the goal. Measurable, it means that I have a measure there, quantitative measure. It provides a checkpoint for when tasks are achieved, gives specific feedback, creates accountability. Attainable, it has to be reasonable and realistic and attainable, something that I can do. And so there are ways of developing SMART objectives that where you can check if it's attainable by looking at the history of your institution. That should not limit the potential for improvement, but also you don't want to set objectives that are really pie in the sky, because what you end up doing is really have a sense of frustration that you have not achieved them. So, and they have to be realistic and attainable and timed. So let's look at this example. SMART objectives, here's my goal. And here are my SMART objective 1, which is really has 4 components. It has a measurement indicator, the word to, and an action verb. It has how much or how little will you consider success? So increased completion rates is the measurement indicator. Increase, I am increasing. So there's a qualitative measure here, but there's also a quantitative measure by saying by 20%, how much and how little will you consider success? And I made 20%, not just a number that I throw out there, but by looking at the history, the average of completion rates that I had in the institution for the student population. I might increase it a bit, but I don't want to increase it too much that it becomes unattainable, because success brings success, but also failure can be a mental, can have a mental cost. So I want something that I can achieve as well. So how much time do I need to achieve desired results? 12 months. Again, this is a yearly academic year. And at what cost is 100,000. That comes from the resources that I quantified, based also on experience with doing this estimates of how much I need to pay, staff, I need for non-personnel expenses, programs. Again, you create a budget for that, and you do this, you develop these numbers based on informed assessments. So there are the 4 pieces or the 4 questions that you need to ask to create a SMART objective. The SMART objective needs to have the qualitative, the quantitative measure, the timeline, and the cost. Sometimes the cost is not included, and this is what I've done in the second objective here, that has to do with graduation. So the first objective is completion rates, and the second objective is employment post-graduation. So I set myself the goal or the SMART objective of increasing post-graduation employment to 100% after 6 months. All right, any questions?
I actually have a question on this, especially the postgraduate employment. So
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out measurable objectives. So in terms of for CUNY's timeline with our reports, the grant year ending in June and the employment 6 months later, like when
Right.
I'm putting the measurements together, I don't know if I'll be able to
Yeah.
know that. So that's one of my questions. You know, a lot of the measurable items I'm getting, like that I'm finding data for from like 2020 and maybe 2021. So I don't even know if I'll be able to measure them.
Yeah, and Penny, that's an excellent question. And please feel free to consider what I have here as completely fictional. Completely fictional. All my content.
But also the, you know, like that, those are metrics that we would look at, you know, the graduate.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if we'll have that in time. Like, that's, you know, one of my big questions is what I'm.
Yeah, the content here do not matter at all. What I'm trying to do is really show you the process, and this will be different from institution to institution. You will have completely different numbers. I threw out numbers here without any consideration because I only want to show you the process. But the content is going to be your content. And again, I'm happy to provide technical assistance and guide this process of thinking through based on the institutional climate, the institutional data. And we're working with a couple of institutions now on doing that. Just that, looking at the data and seeing what the mean average is over 5 years and really coming up with reasonable, again, realistic, attainable, and reasonable objectives. So here I threw out these numbers really as just an example. So please ignore them completely and use your own. And does that answer your question, Penny, or you still have concerns?
No, I understand. You're just giving us an example. I was just concerned,
Yeah.
you know, on our own, what we're trying to put together, how to find the success rate.
Yeah, absolutely. You create your own, and it's going to be completely different from one institution to the other. You're all different institutions, different geographies, different fields, different programs. So these are only examples. So, and they may be out there really not very accurate. So, so second, the fourth step under the logic model is to refine the activities. So here is the point where I'm going to look at the activities and ask myself, how do I quantify the activities and refine them? And so again, now that I had a chance to look at the resources to develop SMART objectives, I go back to these activities and say, okay, these are embedded in the literature. I know these are best practices. This is what works, but am I able to do all of them? And then I cut or add based on that analysis. Again, we're refining our thinking and we're revisiting here because now we're really considering it in the light of the inputs that we have and what we developed. It's important to revisit them because you may not be able to advance all of the activities you developed, considering the resources you have or the ones you believe you can develop. If it's important, the activities again need to be reasonable, attainable, realistic. Okay, so in the next step, this is the logic model that you'll see. And so I am developing here the intermediate outcomes and the long-term impacts. I know what my long-term impacts are. You see them here in the right-hand side, right-hand column. But I need to predict what the intermediate outcomes will be. These are critical because evaluation need to be done during program implementation, not just after. So the intermediate outcomes really are very informative because they will tell you if your activities are achieving the milestones you expect them to achieve. You don't want to wait until the end of the program to realize that the activities didn't work, but there is something that you could do midway, then you are able to do it, and that is saves you from the outcome of a non-successful program. If you're not reaching these guideposts, then you need to shift gears and adjust the program midway. So the intermediate outcomes are all student-centered in this example and have to do with a state of competence, relatedness, and autonomy again, drawing on the self-determination theory, providing students with a sense of control that these female students need to experience to be able to adjust well and perform at a higher capacity. So I need to ask myself, are my activities really producing these changes that are predicted to lead to the long-term outcomes? So it's really a roadmap. If I do these activities, I'm going to, my assumption, if I do these activities, implement them, then I will be able to acquire these or see these intermediate outcomes, which is again going to lead me to the long-term impacts that I'm looking for. If not, then they are not working and I need to reconsider them and change them. Okay, so you have objective 1. Here are the activities, intermediate outcomes, long-term outcomes. Objective 2, you have it's a roadmap. Am I getting what I set out to do or not? Am I meeting these goals, intermediate in these milestones? If I'm not, then I need to change them if I'm not meeting them. All right, so now we have gone through phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 3 is your blueprint. And so your blueprint, as you can get a sense now, every phase is building on the previous phase. And really it allows us to refine our thinking as we go along. It allows us to sharpen and improve our plan as we go along systematically. And in developing the blueprint, you are really creating the pathways again to the desired change and creating, sharpening that roadmap to achieve that change. So the first step is to back up to your activities and define the scope. You'll see that I only said tutoring or mentoring, but now I need to really drill down and define the parameters that are reasonable and attainable given the resources that we have. So you want to revisit the activities and the intervention and refine the activities. So now you see here an example of how I refined the scope of the activities. I said, I'm going to have a tutoring program. I'll hire 5 tutors. I have 15 students, and each of the students will have a weekly. Again, these are samples. Please don't quote me on that. I am really throwing in fictional scenarios here of these numbers should not be considered, and should be considered in the context of your program. They're only given here as example and as sample. I want to create a mentoring program. I'll hire 15 mentors, or I'll assign 15 mentors. Our mentoring program does not have any compensation. I don't know if your mentoring program has compensation or honorarium, but you need to decide that at this stage. 15 students, 2 case managers, 10 academic and social activities for academic year, 1 coordinator or referral services, 2 advisors, 1 career service coordinator part-time, and then again, I'm building the budget for it, right? And see if I need to go up or I need to go down. with my budget. So any questions so far? All right. So next in the process, we define the process indicators and the outcome indicators. And these are the two right-hand side columns that you see. The critical value of this, again, that they tell us whether we are being efficient and effective, whether we are managing or moving to the desired change that we have. Process indicators are metrics that we really impose on ourselves. And outcome indicators are also measures of that we dedicate ourselves to achieving. So again, they have to be realistic and reasonable, but they have to be aspirational too. So process indicators are really metrics of efficiency. They tell us if I have produced the quantity and the quality that I defined as necessary. So I define how many tutoring sessions, mentoring arrangements, number of students served, faculty trained, and events held, number of people I want to target to participate in the training. The quality and quantity are really important. So you can have a training that only one person attended or two people attended, and that is not enough. And you have 20 faculty. So you've not been able to bring them to, there are external factors, of course, that hinder your ability to bring people to trainings, but it means that you have not achieved your threshold of efficiency. If you said, I'm going to do 4 trainings in a semester, again, these are fictional numbers, please don't quote me on them. And then you ended up not having enough time, and you only did 2 trainings and crammed everyone in 2 trainings, then you have not reached your threshold of efficiency or effectiveness. So process indicators and outcome indicators are really thresholds that you define before you even implement the program to say, if I do this, then this is what I consider success. This is what I consider the minimal floor for efficiency and effectiveness. And you'll see that the outcome here, the outcome indicators have to do with effectiveness. How many people will really feel an increased sense of belonging, feel that they have coping skills, ability to manage, an ability to achieve career integration or success. The GPA of students is an outcome indicator. And you really are doing here is provide yourself with guideposts or benchmarks or thresholds that I can aspire to. And as I am really implementing the program, if I fell below them, then it is a red flag for me as I'm going along. So I might be able to tweak what I'm doing midway, adjust so that I am able to reach those minimum thresholds. So, and they are estimates, but they should be informed estimates of what happened in the history of your institution. So you shouldn't really create numbers, again, that are like I did here, that are not embedded in the history of when you do trainings, how many people come to the trainings. If you have, excuse me, if you have 20 people come to the training, then you want to be more aspirational and recruit more deliberately and set a more aspirational goal, but you shouldn't go perhaps beyond a 5% more or 10% more to be realistic and really give a lot of thought to these numbers. Any questions? So the blueprint really allows me to also determine methods of collecting data. And so you see here, it's all assembled together. I have clear thresholds of success. I know how to define success If I achieve these benchmarks or these thresholds, I'm considering myself successful. And the bottom here, the bottom two columns that you see tells me how I'm going to go about telling or proving that I've reached or not reached those thresholds or these benchmarks. So consider evaluation as a small, really research study that you're doing, where you're collecting data from students, from faculty, from project records and student records, to be able to account for the success, the efficiency, process efficiency, and outcome efficiency. So they really require staff time. They really require collection of data, analysis of data, and intervention within the program so that you are adjusting for any inefficiencies or ineffectiveness. All right, so and the blueprint allows me to do that. It's you have to set up where the sources of your data will come from. So as you see here, project records will tell me how many, the number and the quantity of things that I've done. The outcome will tell me the quality of what I've done. So I'll survey students, I'll survey faculty. I may survey them before and after to see if there's change in the before and after. If the GPA has changed for students, I want to see, not just their perspectives, which is a level 1 evaluation, but I want level 2 is also the test for knowledge or increased knowledge and skills in these areas. So I'll check, like I said, for attribution. Are they really considering when you are experience not so successful outcomes, do you blame yourself, or you blame the external factors? And if you blame yourself, then that is a red flag, really. And if also you can test for growth mindset and fixed mindset. Again, do the students feel that they can succeed, that they can, if they work hard enough, acquire or grapple with the material or understand the material, or do they feel that intelligence is something you're born with and you either have it or you don't? Again, fixed mindset really give us a lot of red flags that we can check for and intervene to address. So, so that is important. Again, it's a roadmap that really guides implementation, but also guides the evaluation. So the beauty of this is that you're creating your action plan as well as you are creating your evaluation plan, because you cannot have an evaluation plan without an action plan. So the last row that you see here is the monitoring and evaluation row. And really it does show you that I'm going to be doing evaluation at certain points. Again, this is the timeline, and you can create this Gantt chart very easily in Excel with much more details than what you are seeing here. You have seen here, and I'm sure many of you have these timelines already. There are so many programs that do that very professionally. But the important thing is that you have a tool to track what you're doing, when you're doing them, and when, who's going to do what, when, and how. That's what your action plan should say. And so you'll see here the pilot, refine, and scale up, which we will talk about next. It's very recommendable that we recommend that when you have a program that you do a small scale piloting of that program. And the idea is that sometimes when we create things on paper and we try to implement them in the real world, things do not happen the same way as they do happen on paper. So there are external forces that intervene with our ability to carry out our expectations. So it's very, very important to do a small scale pilot. So if you're doing a tutoring program and you have the scope of your tutors, of your tutoring program right there, you take 2 tutors and 2 students and implement, take the first few months here to implement the program and see, and then evaluate to see, if there are things you can improve as before you move on to full-scale programming. And so here, for example, when you refine, when you do your pilot, you want to ask what could be strengthened, what is missing, what could be added, subtracted, what could be eliminated. So the pilot really is an invaluable tool because it allows you to really test drive your assumptions in the real world and improve. And it may save you a lot of heartache and a lot of frustration when you try to implement in the real world and it doesn't work as planned. So once you've done the pilot of the intervention, you test the process efficiency and outcome effectiveness. Again, you collect the data, you see what can be improved, you refine your blueprint, and then you scale it up to everybody. Again, this is how it looks like, all assembled in one slide. And so on the left-hand side, you have all the steps right there. And then the phase 1 is confirmation of the theory of change, where we created structured the problem, defined it, and then we said, here's the impact or the ideal state of affairs that we'd like to see. Here are the activities. And again, the draft of activities, we go back to them here when we scope them out and we refine them. But here are the logic model is right there with your inputs, your goal objectives, activities, intermediate outcomes, long-term outcomes. And in this example or case study, I have 2 objectives. You may have as many objectives as you can, as long as you feel they are necessary. And then, so here is the blueprint, and my blueprint has my activities, my scope, process indicators, outcome indicators, my evaluation methods, the timeline, and then the pilot here. And phase 5 is the test, and then the scale up of the intervention, the refinement of the blueprint and the scale up. All right, so that's all I have for you. And let me stop sharing here and open it up for your questions, your comments. Let me ask you this. How many of you have a version of an evaluation plan that guides your day-to-day activities or your operations?
Dina?
Yes.
As part of the application, that's a lot of what
the application is.
Yeah, what they're looking for with that, with the goals and the objectives and the plans, and they all have to do it.
Right.
Did you have any specific strategies that they might be able to employ in the applications that they're working on right now for the coming year?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's always good to really look at, again, what other institutions are doing, what the research tells us. You will never go wrong by embedding your work in the state of science and the state of practice. I think whenever I write a grant proposal, the first thing that I do is look at what other institutions are doing, what other model programs are out there that has been proven effective, and what does the research tell me? And I try to build my my project design based on that. Again, just like we discussed here, my theory of change has to be connected to something that has been proven to work, not something that I think might work or that people have a good sense about, but has been proven to work. And so being in an academic institution is a blessing because you have access to that literature. You have colleagues across the Perkins network who are doing similar things. You know, you can have conversations with them on what worked and what didn't. But again, you know, go back to research that has been proven effective in student success and CTE student success in particular. And I'm not sure if you have specific questions about the grant proposal itself, but that would be really my broad or my general recommendation. And that's exactly what I do before I start doing anything. I want to build on what has already been done and not start from what others have started, but really build on what has been done out there. So are there any specific questions as you are developing your proposals? Because we also teach grant writing and be happy to help with that. However, you know, are there any specific questions or challenges that you are facing as you're designing your programs and, you know, creating your goals and your SMART objectives? Don't be shy now. You can type in the chat if you don't want to say it, but you know, and Kim, from where you're sitting, do you see a common, without of course divulging any confidentiality here, but do you see any issues that you would recommend people focus on?
Well, I would say that I think a lot of people put, as they should, into put a lot of emphasis on advertising to try to advertise, you know, have representation in advertising and all that. I do see a lot of that.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of impact from it. And I don't know whether that's, you know, it could be better done or whether it's just not something that's going to have a great impact.
Yeah, I agree with you. It can be really a waste of time and money. I mean, as far as recruitment, and the best is to really start meet the population where they are, and to reach out through non-traditional means. You know, try to find prospective students through, you know, non-traditional channels, and of course social media, because this population, the traditional population, is really on social media. However, when it comes to retention, definitely student support. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't say, you know, the pool of special population, you're not going to find them through advertisement or mainstream advertising channels. But you really need to partner with community-based organizations, and that they are connected with faith-based organizations. And you need to do one-on-one recruitment, really. Having ambassadors from your institution have been a best practice as well. People who are representative of the population, the special population, and having them recruit their peers. That has been also a powerful way of doing it. But I think that we need to think outside the box and to see what other institutions around the US have been doing, you know, and what worked and what didn't. There's a huge body of literature on messaging and, you know, what worked and what does not work. But what we know is that, you know, you can do social media. You're not going to reach everybody through one channel or one way, but you have to have a diversity of recruitment methods to be able to reach everybody, and has to be targeted to the specific situations and the specific conditions of this population and where you can find them, you know. In the communities, in the schools, again, working with the high schools is the traditional way, but you know, I think that we all need to think outside the box. It's a lot of labor of love, as I said. It's a lot of work to bring non-traditional students and special population students to the institution, but it's incredibly rewarding, and it's incredibly satisfying, I guess, when you have someone from a special population graduate. It's transformative, and yes, they do need a lot of services and a lot of support services to be able to make it. That it's definitely transformative. Someone asked if we'll be sending the copies of the PowerPoint presentation, and yes, we will. And we will put it on the NET website. And again, you know, I want to emphasize that we are available to provide one-on-one, you know, technical assistance to all of you, and really help you facilitate that process of developing goals that are targeted and that target the data. We're working with one institution now that, and we have their data, and we're analyzing their data, and really will recommend, again, we're guide on the side, we're not in the driving seat. You are, this is your institution, but we're happy to provide the knowledge we know about program evaluation, program development, and grant writing is really, and proposal development is really the conceptualization of the program, the design of the program. And at this point is when you really think about all these issues and what would get you to that desired change. It's not about just building strategies and activities. No, it's about activities and strategies that work, that really get us to the desired change. And when that happens, it's really incredibly important, incredibly rewarding. So I don't know if that answers your question, Kim, but I guess also on the NET website, there are a number of resources that are available, number of strategies. But again, you know, a strategy that worked in another institution may not work with your institution, because every institution has its own cultural climate, its own culture, organizational culture, its own problems. You're embedded in different geographic locations with different student populations and different needs. And it's important to understand what kinds of problems, what are the extent and nature of the problems that your students are experiencing. Without that, you're just creating strategies to address what you think is the problem, and not, perhaps it may be the right problem and it may not be the right problem. So, so again, you know, I think it is a persistent problem, and it will take, for the gender non-traditional, and the special population, it will take much more creative, innovative, out-of-the-box thinking than just the traditional means of advertising and ways of reaching the traditional pool of students. It's really taking partnerships and with industry, partnerships with community-based organizations, partnerships with communities and faith-based organizations to address a deeply embedded cultural problem. So any other questions? I think we're coming up to the end, but happy to take another question if you have. and really hope that many of you will reach out and leverage the services that we have for you, whether it's climate surveys or evaluation plan development or really working with you on action plans and brainstorming strategies, whatever you need to move forward. That desired change that we're all seeking, we're happy to provide. Okay, all right. If there are no other questions, all that is left to say is thank you so much for your time. Appreciated having you all here, and hopefully we'll hear from you in the future. And please remember that we have a conference next week, next Thursday. You must have received an invitation to attend. It will be, the theme of the conference is resilience in STEM careers. And we have a keynote, we have a panel, and we have the Vanguard Award celebrations. So hope to see many of you next week at the conference. And again, it's a virtual conference. So please register when you receive the announcement and join us. We'd love to have you there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.